Discussion on the chapter-wise overview of the Bhagavad Gita, and here we'll start with the chapter 2. Start with chapter 2, and I'll quickly do a recap of chapter 1 before we go to chapter 2. Okay. Sorry. Okay, why is it not coming till now? Hare Krishna, thank you. So in the first chapter, essentially, we discussed how Arjuna came ready to do his Kshatriya Dharma, his duty of fighting the war. But then, as he seemed to be poised for victory, Duryodhana was rattled initially by seeing the formidable military formation, and then on hearing the confident and victorious blowing of conches by the Pandava forces, the run of the game, the flow seemed to be in the side of the Pandavas. But then suddenly Arjuna had this desire, let me go in the middle of the, and let me observe who is here. So, Aikshitaha, Aveksheham, Niriksheham. Several verses where eyes are emphasized. And one of the names for this chapter is observe, that first chapter was observing the armies on the battlefield. So he observes, and then suddenly he remembers that, or rather it not remembers, it registers very deeply within him that these are all my relatives. They are all belonging to my Kula. And he remembers his Kula Dharma. Let me know when it has come there. So he remembers that I also have my Kula Dharma. And he starts thinking that I have to do my Kula Dharma. How can I not do it? Is this a common problem? Are all of you able to hear me? Now or earlier also? Okay, fine, thank you. So, I have to, what about my Kula Dharma? And starts failing to do his Kula Dharma, and the disastrous consequences of that start going deep into his mind. And he says, I can't fight. And that's where he stops. So, the Bhagavad Gita's first chapter starts from the bottom of the ladder of abstraction, where there is very concrete, specific example. But from there, the Gita is rapidly moving towards a universal principle. So, okay, still not come? Okay. So, now we come to the second chapter. The second chapter, does anyone know how many verses are there? Yes, 72 verses. Thank you. So this is among the longest chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. The 18th chapter is the longest with 78 verses. This is the second longest. Now, at the start of the Gita, so we will be using a particular conceptual flow, and then we will look at the sections of the Gita based on that conceptual analysis and flow. So the Gita begins with, at this point, Arjuna is considering, I'll use KLD, that is Kula Dharma. He's considering that much more important than Kshatriya Dharma. And that's why he said, I cannot fight. And if we consider weighing balance, or rather, now on one side of that is his Kshatriya Dharma, on another side of that is his Kula Dharma. So now, this weighing scale, he's weighing which is the more important duty. So if you consider this broadly to be a weighing scale, this keeps tilting. So initially when he has come to the battlefield, it is like this. The Kshatriya dharma is far more important than the Kula dharma. So this is, you could say, at the start of the chapter 1. Chapter 1 start. But by the end of chapter 1, by the start of chapter 2, it has become the opposite. That for him, he is thinking the Kula dharma is far more important. And the Kshatriya dharma, well, forget it, that's terrible. I have to fight against my relatives, I can't do it. So therefore he says, I will not fight. He is torn between two duties, and one duty is being much more important. He feels much more important for him. So then at this particular point, Krishna responds. And Krishna's initial response is at a very non-philosophical level. Because it's a normal conversation going on. Krishna says, come on, don't be weak like this. Kutastva kashmalamidam. Kashma, this weakness. Klaibyam masmagama partha. This is weakness. Don't succumb to such weakness. So, if we consider the way the Gita is flowing, in verses 2 and 3, so he says this is weak-heartedness. You are just giving in to weakness. And suppose, say we are doing something, and say, say we are making some plates of prasadam, and say we make one plate for ourselves, and we have 2-3 other guests coming, and then we make 3 other plates for the guests, and somebody says, are you going to eat 4 plates yourself? What about others? Keep some food for others. Say, I'm not eating 4 plates myself, I'm cooking for somebody else. See, when somebody ascribes a lower motive to us while we have a higher motive, then there is indignation. How dare you think like this about me? So like that, in 4 and 5, Arjuna's response is, this is not weakness. This is not weak-heartedness. He says, this is large-heartedness. He says, will you fight against your guru and your grandfather? He says that I am not refusing to fight because I am weak-hearted. He's saying that I am refusing to fight because I am large-hearted. I am thinking about the gravity of the situation, the agony of the situation. He says that Guru nahatva hi mahanubhava. That after killing our own gurus, what will we attain? So if you look at this verse, sorry, where is this? Here. So let's recite this word. Arjuna vacha. Let's recite together. Katham bhishmam aham sankhe dronam cha madhusudana ishubhi pratiyotsyami pujara varisudana. So he's saying, this is not weakness. He says, how can I attack with arrows venerable people like Drona and Bhishma, when I should be offering flowers to them, I should be respecting them, I should be worshipping them. Next verse he will say that if I kill them, then the kingdom will be tainted with their blood. What is the value of such a kingdom? So he very strongly says that I'm being large-hearted over here. Don't ascribe a lower motive like weakness to me. I'm not being weak. So here is a katham. So generally when you ask a rhetorical question, rhetorical question generally asked means it's a self-evident answer. Right, who would steal food from, which wealthy person would steal food from the plate of a starving person? No one. That is the answer. There's a rhetorical question and the answer is implicit. It's a rhetorical question. He's indignant over here. But then as he's thinking like this, he goes further and he says, actually, the Kshatriya dharma is also important. I'm a warrior, this is my duty, so what should I do? That's why in 2.6, he says, Nachaitad vitmaha kataran nogariyo. So chapter 1 start was like this, chapter 2 start was like that. But when he comes to 2.6. He has come to a place where more or less again he considers, or he considers at this point the Kshatriya Dharma and the Kula Dharma to be more or less equal. And he is confused. Na chaitad vidma. I don't know which is higher, which is lower. I don't know whether I should fight or not fight. I don't know whether I should win, or winning is better, or abandoning the battle is better, or losing is better. And therefore, his next question, this analysis of dharma, of various dharmas, it makes sense when we, or it actually leads very naturally to the question which Arjuna asks. He says, Pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. So, in 1.46, Arjuna has said that is indicated by the actions, I will not fight. Now in 2.7, he asks, please tell me what is dharma. And then by 2.9, he says that, or it is indicated that Nayotseti govindam uktva tu shrim babhuvaha. I won't fight. So, in one sense, at 146 and 2.9, there is a big similarity. Because in both places, Arjuna is saying, I won't fight. But there is a huge difference. Here, he is saying, let's put another line here. Here he is saying, fighting is wrong. It is immoral to fight. How can I fight against my own relatives? That is his mood over there. He's asked rhetorical question, we'll go to hell, our society will be ruined. But in 2.9, when he's saying I will not fight, he says, I don't know what is the right thing to do. So till I know what is the right thing to do, I won't do anything. I won't fight. So here, it's more here it's not a decision. Here it's more a resolution to gain knowledge. He says, I need to know. Without knowing what is the right thing to do, I can't do anything right now. So here, so that's why that the refusal to fight in the second chapter and the first chapter, they are different. The second chapter it is, I won't fight till I know what is the right thing to do. So please tell me what is the right thing to do. And it is this point that Krishna begins the Bhagavad Gita. So now Krishna prahasan iva bharata, it is said. So he's smiling. Now there are different acharyas giving different reasons for explaining why he's smiling. So actually Arjuna is in tears. If you consider the Bhagavad Gita, it seems, if you consider the first 10 chapters, 2.1, Arjuna is in tears. And 2.10, Krishna is in smiles. If somebody is crying, how can somebody else be smiling? Right in front of that person, close to you. But Krishna is smiling because he is himself, in one sense, appreciating the wondrous ways of the world. Of course, those ways of the world are his arrangement. But what has happened is, his friend has become his student now. And this smile is because of the dramatic changes the world happening. His friend, not friends, his friend has become a student. And just now, the battlefield is going to become a classroom. And the level of the discussion has risen from the circumstantial to the universal. Because Arjuna does not ask the specific question. Pruchhami tvam mama dharma sammudha cheta. He does not ask what is my duty. He asks a very universal question. What is duty? What is the right thing to do? So Krishna has here been given an opportunity to speak wisdom that will be for the benefit of the entire universe. And thus Krishna is smiling. So, Krishna's smile is not due to the immediate context of Arjuna in tears, but rather the bigger opportunity that is opened due to that. And then when he starts speaking. So, now Jiva Goswami explains, he gives various frames of analysis, but one of the things he says is, if you want to know the purpose of any book, how do we know the purpose of the book? He gives many criteria, but one of the criteria he says is, that he said this is the book. Then one of the ways to know what is the core message of the book is to look at its start and then to look at its end. Especially if it is a systematic book. Say so some speaker is giving a systematic class. They say today we'll discuss this topic. And then at the end of it they'll say that this is what we discussed. One of the ways is a good talk is tell people what you're going to tell them. Tell people and then tell people what you told them. So you look at the beginning, you look at the end, and then you can understand what is the essence. So he uses that frame of analysis to understand or to inquire, to probe what is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And he says the first instructive word spoken by Krishna, that is in 2:11. Now before this Krishna has spoken, but it's just indicative words. 1.25 is Vacha Partha Pashyaitan. Just look at them. And 2.3 is just friendly words. So the 2.11 is the first instructive word. And what is the first instructive word? Ashochan. And then he says, look at the end of the Gita. What is the last instructive word that Krishna speaks? Now Krishna's message ends in 1872. But that is with a question. Before that, there is Falashruti of the Gita. The last instructive verse is 1866. And the last word in that is Ma Shuchaha. So, Ashochan, Ma Shuchaha. So, Ashochan means don't lament, not worthy of lamentation. Ma Shuchaha means don't lament. So, he says the purpose of the Gita is to free humanity from lamentation. So, there are various ways life can put us in grief. Life can put us in distress. Life can make us unhappy. But Ashochan means unworthy of lamentation. So, many of the things that occupy our minds, that especially make us dejected, that make us annoyed, that make us irritated, that make us unhappy in various ways, the Gita will show that they are not worth so much emotion. Ashochan. And then therefore, once we get the vision of the Gita, that it's not worth lamentation. And by the end of the Gita's conclusion is, don't lament. So in between is the wisdom to remove lamentation. So he says this is the purpose of the Gita. The Gita's purpose is to free us from lamentation. And if we approach the Gita in a prayerful, devotional way, we will find this happening. So let's try to explore this. Now when he speaks this, the Gita's essence is to give us the wisdom that will free us from lamentation. Then he begins. Now Arjuna's question is, what is the right thing to do? He's torn between his Kshatriya dharma and his Kula dharma. And then Krishna begins by saying that before you can understand the right activity, you need to go deeper. And go deeper to understand your right identity. So, what should I do? Depends on who am I. And now, what is in this context? We often use the verse that will come later. Krishna says that you are eternal, 2:12. Then he says that the embodied soul changes various bodies. And we often talk about this. Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are not the body. While there is no direct phrase in the Gita which says you are not the body, What it says is, the body keeps changing, but the embodied is unchanging. But in the context of the Gita, what does this mean? This means that we can say that we have one fundamental identity. We have one fundamental or essential identity. And that is that we are all Atma, that we are all souls. And as souls, we are parts of Krishna. That will be told later. But this page says we are Atma. And based on this fundamental identity, we have many functional identities. So for example, we are souls, which is true, but at the same time, we are not just souls. The soul is in a particular body. So because the soul is in a particular body, we have many functional identities. The functional identities are not to be rejected, but they are to be subordinated. So for Arjuna, there are two functional identities. One identity of as a Kshatriya, the other functional identity as a Kurunandana, as a member of a particular Kula. So which identity is more important? That is his torment. That is what is causing him agony. So Krishna says we have many functional identities. Like yesterday I gave the example that a cop is chasing after a criminal and he finds that the criminal is actually his long lost brother. Now what should he do? Should he act as a cop or should he act as a brother? Well, both being a cop and being a brother are functional identities. And below that is our fundamental identity. So many of us, we may identify too much with our functional identity. Suppose somebody identifies, now we have many functional identities. So we could have a functional identity based on our gender. I'm a man or a woman. We may have functional identity based on our age. I'm a child, I'm a youth, I'm a middle-aged person, I'm a senior citizen. We may have our functional identity based on our education. Or you could say, they're not related, but let's keep them as here, profession. We could have a functional identity based on our, say, familial role. That means I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a daughter, like that. We could have a functional identity based on our nationality. I'm an Indian, I'm American, like that. So we have many functional identities. And sometimes one functional identity becomes our whole identity. So for example, if somebody identifies themselves fully as only a student, then if my only identity is as a student, then the whole success of my life is I need to get good grades. And then if I don't get good grades, what is the value of my life? Sometimes just because some students don't get good marks, this happens especially in India, that students end their lives. Now, yeah, not getting good marks is not a good thing, but is it worth ending one's life? They end their life because they have identified themselves so much with that particular functional identity, that I am a student. And if I'm not a good student, then who am I? What am I exactly? Sometimes some people identify with their job so much that if they lose, if I'm a software engineer, if I lose my job as a software engineer, then who am I? If somebody identifies themselves solely as a parent. Now each of these roles is important. And to some extent identification is fine. But if that is how it is, somebody solely identifies themselves only as a parent. And then when children are small, they need their parents a lot. But as the children start growing up, they get into teens, and then they grow older. Then they have their own life. Now if somebody solely identifying themselves as a parent, and they find that, my child doesn't need me, my child doesn't want me, then they say, who am I? What am I meant to do now? So if say our identity if it becomes equal to one functional identity, then we set ourselves up for frustration. We set ourselves up for frustration. Now, that frustration can be because of many reasons, but one reason could be that one functional identity is taken away for whatever reason. If somebody identifies themselves solely as, say, a sports player, a cricketer, and they get a life-altering injury and just can't play anymore, then who am I? Or the frustration can also come because of that functional identity may collide. It may collide with another functional identity. And this is what has happened to Arjuna. So that means, like, if I'm a doctor and I have a patient in the critical ICU, and then it is my daughter's first birthday. Now, should I be at home? Should I go there? I may say, that's a patient's critical life, you should go there. But suppose somebody is in a job where constantly they are called for the job and they're not there with the parents. Now, what should I do? If I identify myself too much with any one role, there will be a problem. So the Gita says, begin, Arjuna, you are not a Kshatriya, you are not a Kurunandana. You are an Atma. And begin with that foundation. So now when Krishna talks about the Atma, one characteristic that he focuses on is that the Atma is what? Eternal. It is indestructible. Now he's speaking about the indestructibility of the soul, because the way Krishna begins, he doesn't say, Arjuna, you are the soul. What does he say? Natvevaham jatu nasam, natvam neme janadhipaha. He says, everybody here is a soul. And I mentioned in the previous chapter, yesterday's class, that Arjuna not once does he express fear of his own death. So when Krishna is saying that the soul is eternal, that is not to assure Arjuna that you are not going to die. It is to assure Arjuna that Bhishma and Drona are not going to die. And that, if you see in this context, then the later verse, Vasam sijirnan yatha vihaya, that makes great sense. That their body is aging now. They anyway have to give up this body, but if they die in this battlefield, they will get a new body. Prabhupada also says in his purport that they will get elevated, they will get a better body. So don't identify yourself. Don't think that you are a Kshatriya and you're killing somebody, or you are a Kula Dharma and how can you kill someone? See, you are eternal, they are eternal. And if they die, they will get a better body. And now if you consider this starting point, which we said that the purpose of the Gita is to ensure that Arjuna does not lament. So Arjuna's primary lamentation, while there are many causes for his lamentation, his primary lamentation is, how can I kill Bhishma and Drona? He's concerned about the entire dynasty, but he's especially concerned about Bhishma and Drona. And by emphasizing the eternality of the soul, Krishna says, they are not going to die. And we will see now that in the Gita, there will be, as Krishna, this section of the eternality of the soul, Krishna talks from 11th verse to the 22nd verse, or the 30th verse rather. So there towards the end, after he's talking about the soul, 5 times Krishna uses the word shocha, or let's see, 225 is, he gives the characteristics of the soul, and last line is what? Nanu shochitum arhasi. Understand that the soul does not change, and therefore you should not lament. Then again, he says, actually, nainam shochitum arhasi. Here he gives another reasoning. He says, even if you don't believe in the soul, still the point is the body is temporary. Nainam shochitum arhasi. Again, na shochitum. This is 25, 26. And then 27, again, na tvam shochitum arhasi. Do not lament. The purpose of the Gita is to free Arjuna from lamentation. Tatra ka paridevana. So paridevana is just a variant word. Essentially it means don't lament. And in fact here it's not even the other verses are more instructive. Natvam shochitum. Here Krishna is turning the strategy that Arjuna used. Arjuna asks a rhetorical question and Krishna also asks a rhetorical question. Ka paridevana. The material things are temporary. They are anyway going to change. So why lament about that? And then again, next verse, last verse in the 30th verse is, let's cite this verse. Dehi nityam avadhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam shochitum arhasi. So, natvam shochitum arhasi. So, the section on Atma Gyan is primarily meant to reassure Arjuna, don't lament. In this section, Krishna does not really tell Arjuna what to do. He does not specifically say fight in this section. He is not really given an explicit instruction. He said one who thinks they kill or they are killed, they are all in ignorance. And to lament for death is illusion. Now, so in one sense, in 211 to 230, Krishna gives the philosophical foundation. And then with that philosophical foundation, now Krishna will give ethical direction. I'll explain what this means. See, there is ethical crisis or ethical dilemma that Arjuna is facing. Yesterday we discussed how there is morals are about this is good, this is bad, but ethics are more about a system of morals. And okay, which is a higher morality, which is a lower morality? How do we decide that? So Arjuna was in an ethical crisis, and to solve Arjuna's ethical crisis, Krishna, this might seem like a big word, but it's just a simple word, is ontological analysis. Ontology, it means the nature of reality. So that means to determine what is right, first you should know what is, what exists. Before you decide what is right, you have to know what is existing. So his question is, what is right? So before that, you can say what is or what is real. So that is how, this is Arjuna's situation. But Krishna's answer begins with what is real. Before you decide, okay, should I go and drink the water over there or not? Should I go over there and chase the water? But is there water or is it a mirage? Before you decide what is right and what is wrong, you have to know what is real and what is unreal. So what the Gita does is, like I said, before you can decide activity, you need to understand identity. So now philosophy has various branches to it. So philosophy, one of its branches is ontology. Ontology means what exists, what is real, as I said. Then another branch is, as I said, ethics. What is right. Now many branches, but these are key branches if you want to understand. Another is epistemology. Epistemology is what is the way to know what is real and what is right. Epistemology is knowledge about knowledge. What is, so for example, when we talk about pratyaksha praman, anuman praman, shabda praman, that is epistemology. What is the way to know? And then now increasingly this is talked about is aesthetics. Aesthetics is what is fulfilling. So in one sense you could say, if you want to go in a progression, epistemology is the first. What is the way to know? Then once you know what the right way to know, the next is, okay, what exists? Once you know what exists, then you decide what is right. Now, there may be many things which are right, but we can't do all the right things. We do those right things which are fulfilling. So the Gita takes us on this journey. Now Krishna does not go into epistem. Okay, let me repeat this. I think I went a little too fast here. So the Gita's focus is that, if you consider, let me put it another way, we could consider this to be like a narrowing pyramid. So first, if you want to gain knowledge, the path to enlightenment, first is epistemology. What is it that we can know? What is the way to know things? Say, what is the method for gaining knowledge? Say, if somebody has got fever, how do we know that they have fever? When we touch their forehead. Their forehead is hot. Okay, they've got fever. But maybe they just took a hot water bath. We don't know. So that is one way to know. But a more reliable way to do it, you go to a doctor, take some proper measurements. So what is the way to know? That is the first thing. Then after that is, after epistemology is ontology. Okay, once we know what exists, then after we know what is the way to know, then we look at what exists. Okay, once I get to know, once I get the means to know, like if I am looking at the sky, what is the way to look at the sky? I can look with my unaided eyes, but I can't see much. Okay, what is the way to know? Okay, have a telescope. Okay, we use a telescope. Then, okay, what exists out there? What is real? Once I understand what is real, and the third thing comes is ethics. Then what should I do? What is the right thing to do? And then finally is aesthetics. Okay, that what will be fulfilling for me? What will you give meaning to my life? So in one sense, the Gita's journey, epistemology is not there in the Gita so much, and I'll explain why. Ontology focuses on the nature of the soul, the ethics focus on yoga, and the aesthetics culminates in bhakti. And I'll explain the flow of the Gita also a little later, how it moves forward. See, the Gita does not focus on epistemology because in the Gita's context, it's understood that real knowledge is to be got from the Vedas. And Krishna is going to summarize Vedic knowledge to Arjuna. And that's why epistemology is implicit. But ontology, Krishna analyzes, okay, you are a soul. And what is if you understand your soul, then what is the purpose of the soul? The purpose of the soul is to link with the whole. And that linking with the whole, that process is called yoga. And there are many yogas. But the most fulfilling of those yogas is when the link is established through love, through bhakti. So the Gita here is focused on ontology, the nature of reality in 2:11 to 30. And then from here it will move towards ethics. It will move towards what is the right thing to do. Okay. So if what I'm speaking is very complicated, don't worry, it's only going to become more complicated. Okay, but I'll stop in a few minutes and we'll have some questions. So I'll talk about two things right now. So in one sense, if we consider, say this is, I often write the word bullseye, but that sometimes we use some words. Bullseye is such a brutal idea, There's a bull and you have to hit it in the eye. Like we use the word target. Why hurt a bull like that? Isn't it? So let's use the word target over here. Now suppose somebody is an expert archer. They can hit an arrow straight to the target. And that is an expert archer. The target is here and you shoot that. But an even more expert archer, they can hit the target not just from the straight, from the side, from the front. An expert archer may hit the target from the side. And not just from one side, from another side. And from here. If I'm describing an expert archer, but I'm not an expert drawer. But suppose this is the target. Now, if somebody is really an expert archer, they can hit the target from multiple directions. So now, from the perspective of Krishna, for Krishna the target is that this is a dharma yuddha. Krishna has come for, he will tell later, the dharma samsthapanartha has come to establish dharma, and establishing dharma means that he wants Arjuna to fight, because by Arjuna's fighting, dharma will be established. So in one sense, yesterday I talked about the contextual purpose and the universal purpose of the Gita. The contextual purpose of the Gita is Krishna wants Arjuna to fight. Now Krishna is so expert that Krishna will bring Arjuna to the conclusion of fighting from multiple directions. So he starts with Karma Kanda. He gives a Karma Kanda analysis and he says, Arjuna, therefore you should fight. This is from 31 to 37. Then he gives a Karma Yoga analysis. And then he says, therefore Arjuna, you should fight. Then he gives a Dhyana Yoga analysis. And there also, this will be later chapters of the Gita. There also the conclusion is, Arjuna, you should fight. He gives a Jnana Yoga analysis. And there also the conclusion is, Arjuna, fight. And last is, what is remaining? Bhakti Yoga. And even from the Bhakti Yoga analysis, Krishna arrives at the same conclusion. Now, how he arrives at the same conclusion, that we will explore. But Krishna is doing this one thing in the Gita. He is basically using different frames of analysis to arrive at the same conclusion. Now, sometimes if some person asks a question and a speaker gives the answer, and sometimes when the speaker gives the answer, just from the expression of this questioner, you can understand that the answer is not satisfied the person. Now, if the answer is not satisfied the person, what does the speaker do? No, sometimes the questioner may ask the same question again, and maybe in another class, and the speaker gives the exact same answer. And the questioner will think, hearing you was not my problem. I could hear you, isn't it? It's that. So a good speaker will answer the same question from multiple perspectives. Okay, from this perspective. So if you want to talk about the Atma, how do you know the Atma exists? We can talk about some intuitive analysis, our sense. We can talk about scientific reasoning. We can talk about biological change of the body. We can talk about near-death experiences. We can talk about past life memories. There are multiple ways, and then one particular reason may click. If many click, that's wonderful. So Krishna is using this multi-dimensional, multi-pronged approach to bring Arjuna to the conclusion that he should fight. And all these in one sense are in the domain of ethics, because all these are determining what is the right thing to do. And all these are based on the foundation of ontology. And that ontology is that we are souls. That everyone in fact is a soul. So Krishna, so 2:11 to 30, he has given the philosophical foundation. The ontology. Generally we use the word philosophy very broadly, and it's true. It's a broad usage, but specifically within philosophy, Krishna has given the ontology. And now, okay, this is what is the nature of reality. Now, after that, he reasons what is right thereafter. So, at the first level, 230, I'll just talk about this one example of how he uses his ontology, and then we will stop and we can have some questions. If there are no questions, then I will move ahead to the remaining part of this chapter also. I was planning to cover this chapter in two parts, because chapter 2 is a little long. Today, half of it, and tomorrow, half of it. So what Krishna does is, Krishna reframes Arjuna's dilemma. Says, Arjuna is thinking that for him there are two options: fight or don't fight. And he is thinking initially both are like lose-lose options. If he fights, he loses his relatives. He has to kill them. Now, Arjuna doesn't really consider the fact that if I fight, I will lose. He is confident that he will win if he fights. If he doesn't fight, that means that not only will his family not have their rightful kingdom, it will also mean like a tyrant like Duryodhana will be ruling the kingdom. And this is the time when we see that all our options are just lose-lose. There's nothing good that is there for us. Then we start thinking, oh, why am I even here? Why am I even living? What is the point of existing if there is nothing, there is no option that can make things better? So in general, we humans need hope to live. And hope means that, okay, I may be in a bad situation right now, but things can become better. I can play a part in making things better. So without that hope, people can lose money, people can lose health, people can lose loved ones. But when people lose hope, that is the most agonizing form of loss. Because if we lose hope, then what is the reason you want to get up every day in the morning? That hope that things can become better. And when we see everything is simply lose, then we just lose hope. So Krishna reframes Arjuna's situation, and what Krishna tells Arjuna is that if you fight, he does not, he says that fight and win, fight and lose. He says, Krishna's purpose is you just fight. That's clear enough. But in both cases, it is win-win. Now, how is it win-win for him? If he fights and wins, he has done his Kshatriya duty. He will get punya, he will get the kingdom of the earth. If he fights and loses, what will happen is, he'll again have done his Kshatriya duty, he is a soul, he is eternal, he will be elevated to the heavens. And in that sense, Krishna tells Arjuna that fighting is good for you in all situations. Now if he's telling you do your Kshatriya duty, then is he still telling him that, what is the point of telling him that he's Atma if Krishna is telling Arjuna to do his Kshatriya duty? Krishna told him his fundamental identity, then why is he talking about his Kshatriya duty now? If, for example, he says, Sukhina Kshatriya Partha Labhante Yuddhamidrusham, that happy are the Kshatriyas who get an opportunity to fight like this. Swargadwaram apavrutam, the doors of heaven open for those who get the opportunity to fight in a dharma yuddha like this. So why is Krishna talking at the level of the functional identity of a Kshatriya? Because, see, the functional identity is never to be rejected. It is to be subordinated to the fundamental identity. Because we have to function in the world. Say, when I come here to America to speak on the Bhagavad Gita, at the immigration, they ask me, where are you from? He says, I can't say I'm a soul. That is one of the main things I'm going to speak here when I come to America. But there, I have to give my functional identity. I'll show them my Indian passport. Isn't it? So we have a fundamental identity, and the functional identity, what do we do? If once we understand our fundamental identity, and then we have our functional identity. So what the point is that we there is a harmony between the two, and the harmony comes by subordinating the functional identity to the fundamental identity. So Krishna is saying, Arjuna, you are the soul, and the soul will be benefited by fighting. By fighting, your soul will get elevated to the heaven. By fighting, and if you win, you will come and stay on earth. But Bhishma and Drona, they will get elevated to heavens. If you lose, you die, your soul will get elevated to heaven. So either way, there is benefit. So when he says Sukhina Kshatriya Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas, he's saying this doesn't just refer to you, Arjuna, it also refers to Bhishma and Drona. So they will be elevated. Now this is the first level of application of Atma Gyan. But Krishna doesn't stay on Karma Kanda for very long. In 238, he immediately ascends to the next level. That is Karma Yoga. And this is, there are many places where Krishna seems to contradict himself in the Gita. And this 237, 238 is the first point of contradiction. And actually it's not a contradiction. How it is not a contradiction, we'll discuss a little later. So, should we, how many of you have questions at this point? I know all of you have one question. When will the class end? But apart from that, other questions. Okay, now I just want to know how many questions are there. So, okay, one question from yesterday's class. Okay. So, till what time should we be normally going on? No. Class till 9 and then Q&A. Okay, there are not too many questions. Okay, 3 questions. We'll come back. So, anyway, okay, hands are coming up. So let's see. We'll go on till, and if we have finished the questions, I can go a little bit ahead also. So let me quickly summarize till now what I discussed. So I started by talking about how first we discussed from 1 to 10. That section was about Arjuna's change, or rather you can say the change in Krishna-Arjuna relationship. The Krishna-Arjuna relationship changes. So initially we discussed how Krishna is speaking at a friend level. Don't be cowardly. Arjuna says, I'm not cowardly. But Arjuna says, but I really don't know what to do. And then he says, you tell me what to do. And you tell me what to do, I need to know what is dharma. And the relation, in one sense, Arjuna initially said, I will not fight. It was almost like a decision. But he says, now when he says, I will not fight till I am clear what is the right thing to do. So, that dynamic in Krishna-Arjuna relationship changes with Arjuna becoming a student. That is 1 to 10. And the second point I discussed is about functional identity and fundamental identity. How Krishna says, before you can understand what is the right thing to do, you have to understand who we really are. So we can have many functional identities, but we have one fundamental identity. And that is the foundation for we deciding what to do. Then we talked about how this analysis was basically ontology, then what is real, so that we can determine what is right. So that what is real is talked about from 11 to 30 in this chapter. And then the first application of that, and then we talked about how the Gita is like multiple approaches to the same target. So a multi-dimensional approach. And then I discussed the one multi-dimensional approach. So Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, all of them are for one target. And the last point that I discussed was how Krishna uses the Karma Kanda analysis to get Arjuna to fight. That fighting is actually a win-win option for him. Okay. Yes. Where are the questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So this is from one of the online participants yesterday. Neela Mataji, she is asking which part in chapter 1 is relevant or specific to that time and to be seen in a different light today.
Now, is which part is relevant to that time? Well, it's, for example, all the names. Now, for understanding the Bhagavad Gita, does one have to necessarily read the Mahabharata and know the life story of all the characters who are mentioned in the first chapter? Well, if you know, well and good. But if you don't know also, that's fine. It's not essential. So, we could say the names, they are helpful. Then we could even say that, so all the names themselves at one level are contextual. And apart from that, even from one perspective, the whole deliberation on should he be fighting or should he not be fighting, that also is contextual. Because the Gita will go, not the, in one sense, fight or don't fight. It's like, fight, don't fight. This is, if you consider ladder of abstraction, this is specific. This is at the bottom of the ladder of abstraction. The universal is what? Work or renounce. So even the specific battlefield setting and the idea of fighting on the battlefield, the reasons to fight, reasons to not fight, that is actually also contextual. Like I mentioned that when we are studying the Bhagavad Gita, it does not mean that we all have to learn to fight or we all have to start fighting, physically at least. That's contextual. Okay. So now when I say it's contextual, doesn't mean that doesn't mean it's mythological or symbolic. It's historical, but it's not necessarily the most central or relevant aspect of the Gita right now. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dhanvat. Thanks for the session, Prabhu. You talked about, Prabhu, that duties. I think we should follow the duties. For example, everything talks about fighting. Fighting is the duty of Arjuna. So Krishna tells Arjuna to fight from different angles. But for example, if I take my case, or as a human being, we have multiple roles to play. For example, I am a father, I am a child, I have parents, I am also working in some company, I am also a soul. In that sense, I have also some duties towards my soul, that hey, I need to do Krishna conscious activities or chanting. So there are multiple duties or multiple fighting themes. Which themes to choose on to fight? And sometimes the prioritization becomes very difficult. And I'll tell you a real case. For example, with my daughter, she is studying, she is a student, but then she also has her own practices, she also has friends. So sometimes I will pester her that hey, your grades are going down and your first responsibility is being a student. But then she will say my responsibility is also that I should do chanting or I should do all that practices, and that is also fair. So how to balance that, and what's the direction we should take? Which is our utmost duty, of course, but then we are in this world also. So how to prioritize and balance, and what is the right direction in this?
When I find out, I'll tell you. Well, there is no one answer for this. It's like, see, what the Gita says is that if you consider this is Krishna, and ultimately, okay, let me put it this way. I don't know whether I'll be able to draw this properly. Say if this is the Atma has many functional roles. Okay. So now for example, as I said, we can be a professional, we can be a parent, we can be a like in this case, say we can be a sadhaka, we can be a citizen of a particular country, whatever it is. So we have all these roles, and what the Gita says is that in one sense, if you just take each of these roles in isolation, then one role may pull me in this direction and one role may pull me in another direction. But if we see that actually all these roles are meant to be connected with Krishna, meant to be used in the service of Krishna. So I am a parent for Krishna, I am a software engineer for Krishna, I am a student for Krishna, I am an Indian for Krishna. I'm American for Krishna. So all the functional roles, they are harmonized in one common purpose. And depending on the particular time, place, circumstance, one functional role may become more important than another. And at that time, that functional role is emphasized. So, on the battlefield context, for Arjuna, the best way for him to serve Krishna was through his functional role as a Kshatriya. Of course, after that was, he acted as a member of his Kula. That role came up in that prominence. So yes, if a student has exams, and before sometimes some children, some kids, when we start doing outreach in engineering colleges in India, there is this very world negating kind of preaching. Everything is temporary. This world is all Maya. So just before exams, when students have a preparatory leave, students suddenly fall in love with Lilamrut and Mahabharata and Ramayana. And they start saying, oh, this engineering, it's all temporary, it's all Maya, it's all nations, it's not science. This Bhagavad Gita is real science. Well, okay. Is it that just before your exam, all that became nations? And then at that time also, you're not really interested in philosophy like the Bhagavad Gita. You're interested in some stories. Ramayana, Mahabharata. Why? Because that is the path of least resistance. So if we understand that what unifies all our roles is a mood of service. If we have a service attitude, then if we have that attitude, then okay, Krishna, how can I best serve you in this situation? And we pray, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Krishna will guide us. Okay, at this point, this is what I should be doing more. At this point, this is what I should be doing more. So it's not simplistic that just because we are sadhakas, but that is not our only function in the world. It's an important function, no doubt, but we have other functions. When say for example devotees, when in the early days of our movement, when Prabhupada was emphasizing book distribution a lot, so the temple leaders in several temples told all devotees, just go out for book distribution. And that's a wonderful book distributors, one book distribution, the great service, and devotees had that service, that role, functional role of being a book distributor. But sometimes there are many young mothers with small children, and they were told, all of them, just keep all the children in the care of one person and all of you go and distribute books. When Prabhupada heard this, he said, no, you take care of your children first. No, that is a more important role. But he said, you're not just taking care of your children, you're taking care of your children in a mood of service to Krishna. These are children who are sent to you by Krishna. Prabhupada would say, these are Vaikuntha children. So he emphasized, you could say the devotional functional role was a book distributor. You could say the more mundane functional role was, from one perspective analysis, the more mundane seeming functional role was being a mother. But Prabhupada said, no, this is more important. So if we have that attitude of service and we understand that it is not that this role is going in this direction, this role is going in this direction. Ultimately, they are all going toward Krishna. Krishna is the harmonizer of all our functional roles. And based on that, we will, some experiment is, some analysis is required, some experimentation is required, some guidance is required. But gradually we start learning, okay, this time let me emphasize this functional role. So if there is an emergency in our family, and there's some satsang program in the temple, obviously at that time, we focus on the emergency in the family. If there is a big festival in the temple, okay, there's some things to be done at home. Yeah, those can be done later also. Let's come to the festival first. So if there is some big deadline in work, then we focus on that. But we do it all in a mood of service to Krishna. Okay? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. We spoke about fulfilling and said that the Bhakti Yoga is most fulfilling. Then how about Jnana Yoga or Karma Yoga? Are they not as fulfilling as Bhakti Yoga? Because based on the other examples,
Okay.
you explained that Krishna was pointing towards the same target with multiple in
Okay.
multiple directions. Thank you.
So are the other yogas not fulfilling? Well, yes. See, there is very little in the Bhagavad Gita that is simply black and white. Much of the Bhagavad Gita is in shades of grey. There are multiple levels. So Gita says there are degrees of fulfillment. Even in simple physical indulgence, the person eats a lot of food, person, physical sensual pleasure, there's also pleasure. But it is a relatively lesser pleasure. It is temporary pleasure. It is a pleasure that eventually leads to disappointment. So there are different degrees of fulfillment. And the idea is that the core of our being, we'll talk about this as we move forward in the Gita, at the deepest level, we are fulfilled when our heart is fulfilled. It is when our deepest longing, it is longing to love and be loved. When the deepest longing is fulfilled, that is when we experience the deepest fulfillment. So it is not, the Gita in no place, it rejects any of the other yogas. For Arjuna, Krishna very clearly says, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. We'll discuss the meaning of that verse when we come to it. But if you want to understand the way the Gita is flowing is, I was going to speak this a little later, but since you raised this question, at one level, the Gita has 1 to 18 chapters. Now, as I mentioned, the Karma Kanda, the Gita does not analyze much. It focuses on, so if we consider, you consider 3 levels, this Karma Yoga, Gyan Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So the way the Gita is going is, this is chapter 6, this is chapter 12 and chapter 18. So chapters, in approximately, the actual Gita explanation starts with chapter 2. So from chapter 2 to chapter 6, the analysis goes from Karma Yoga through Dhyan Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. So 6.47 is Yoginam api sarvesham madgatinantaratmana. The Gita's thought evolves from Karma Yoga through Dhyan Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. Then from chapter 6 through chapter 18, it is a consistent analysis of Bhakti Yoga. Now chapter 13 onwards, this chapter 12 is actually the end of chapter 12. From chapter 13 is actually Gyan Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. So what the Gita is doing is that it acknowledges the value, the validity and the value of various paths. But it says there are different degrees of fulfillment possible through different paths. And the deepest fulfillment comes to Bhakti Yoga. Now, is this Bhakti partisanship? It's not the Gita, because as I said, we have different levels. See, we all want to live. We all want to live. Nobody wants to, in one sense, die. And we all want to know more and more. We all want to be happy. Sat, Chit, Anand. The 3 characters of the soul. But in one sense, life, the quest for life, the quest for knowledge, and the quest for happiness, all of them are integrated and fulfilled when the quest for love is fulfilled. Life becomes meaningful, knowledge becomes meaningful, and joy becomes meaningful when there is love. So, the Atma has these 3 characteristics: Sat, Chit, Ananda. So Sat gives rise to our quest for existence. Everyone wants to, so feature and then quest. So based on the feature of our being, okay, there's a particular quest that we have. The Sat feature of the Atma leads to the quest for existence. The Chit feature of the Atma leads to the quest for wisdom. The Anand feature of the Atma leads to the quest for happiness. Now, if we consider these are all features of the Atma, but all of these are underlined: to love, and to be loved. And when that is that is actually, that is the deepest longing of the soul. And this quest is the quest for bhakti, because bhakti directs the soul's longing towards an eternal object, and that is how it leads to the ultimate fulfillment. This is an elaborate subject and we will discuss it later, but this is a quick answer to this question. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Rajaraman Bro.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, very nice segue into the chapter 2. Prabhuji, when you mentioned, like, based on the Jiva Goswami's, the book analogy, right, you can see the starting and the end, and the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to overcome the lamentation of the amongst us. So, but 1854, he also talks about both hankering and lamentation, right, to overcome. So because usually lamentation is what has happened in the past, and hankering is when we see the future. Like Arjuna is in a situation where he has to fight a battle, where he has to kill his relatives and guru. So I was just wondering, like, how the lamentation gets how hankering gets added up in the flow of the Gita actually.
Okay. Your question is making me lament that I spoke the point about lamentation. Okay. So, I mentioned that the Gita's purpose, as Jiva Goswami, is to raise us above lamentation. But then the Gita is also saying that don't just give lamentation, give up hankering also. So see, there are two different things over here. There is the material level of reality, and there is the spiritual level of reality. Now, when we are at the material level of reality, we are in material consciousness. And in material consciousnness, there are dualities. Sorry, let's put it this way. There are dualities. What is that? Kabhi khushi, kabhi gum. So, there is happiness and distress. And we crave for happiness. That's so. This is happiness, distress, and associated with happiness, distress is there is. So when we are going down over here, say, then we often lament that, oh, that happiness was lost. And when we go up, there is celebration. But all this is, we want to go up, we don't want to come down, but this is just the nature of the world. So hankering and lamenting, now we could say, we want to go up. When we go up, we celebrate. We don't want to come down. When we start going down, we lament. And we really go down, we suffer. But this whole cycle is something which we can transcend if we rise to the spiritual level. So in one sense, you could say that being caught in this cycle of happiness and distress, that itself is a source of lamentation. And it is this source of this lamentation that the Gita is going to tell us to get out of, or guide us to get out of. It's like, suppose somebody is watching a movie. Now, in the movie something good happens, that person is happy. Sometimes in the movie something terrible happens, the person is unhappy. But if the movie is not real life, their real life is waiting somewhere else. It's much better that they get out, stop watching the movie, get up and do something meaningful, and then there is real fulfillment. So the Gita is saying that at one level, see, we can say that way you can analyze in another ways, that the Gita says sukhe dukhe samay krutva, that be equipoised among happiness, amidst happiness and distress. But in the Gita also says this world is dukkhalaya, and get out of this world. If the world is, if you are to be equipoised in happiness and distress, then why get out of this world? Just be equipoised in this world in happiness and distress. But the point is that while we are in this world, if we are constantly battling, oh, I want to get happiness, I want to avoid distress, then that will become the basis of our decision making. But Krishna says, don't decide what you will do solely based on avoiding trouble, avoiding pain, or gaining pleasure. You make your decision basis. You base your decisions on what will raise your consciousness, and that will ultimately free you from distress. So in that sense, he's saying that at one level you will rise above lamentation and hankering because you'll just get out of this cycle. But right now you are caught in the cycle. So how are we going to make the basis for decision making? So normally in material consciousness, we can say it is what? We can say we want to maximum material pleasure and minimum material distress. That is what we seek. And that's understandable at one level, if that's all that we know. But if we are, or let's not put in material consciousness, let's put in here, when we are in spiritual ignorance, because that's all that we know, material life is all that we know. But when we have spiritual knowledge, then what we focus on is the fastest raising of consciousness. So I could say that, sleeping early in the morning and just be comfortable in the cold morning, that's comfortable. Waking up is uncomfortable. But I don't make my decision based on that. The early morning times are very good for my spiritual growth. The Brahma Muhurta time is very good. So then let me not act in this way. Let me act based on spiritual knowledge. So the point of the Gita is that it is telling Arjuna to, when it says, do not, it will take us above lamentation, it means that it will take us out of this, the captivation of our consciousness in this world where there is sometimes pleasure, sometimes pain, there is lamentation eventually. Right? While we are going upwards, at that or while seeking to go upwards, at that time don't make decisions simply based on what is pleasurable or not pleasurable. Focus on what is spiritually purposeful. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah.
Please excuse any background music beforehand.
Sorry, please.
Excuse any background music.
Oh,
With the
okay.
baby.
That background music will wake everyone up.
So, to continue on the lamentation and the hankering, so it's like the Kardab Muni chapter in Bhagavatam is when he's instructing Devahuti on Devahuti's lamentation. So I think there is a verse which he talks about like because of the knowledge, because of the austerities I performed, the knowledge I've gained, so I'm free from this lamentation. Even though you don't have that, I will give you the knowledge so that you can be free of that lamentation. I believe, I don't recollect exactly, but
Yeah.
that's just the gist of it. So, so here the lamentation and then hankering, I always get confused, like, because if there is no future, like at that point of time, I'm lamenting because something is not going to happen, or something I have experienced that I continue to experience because of the fear or whatever it is. So the lamentation, does it include a part of hankering as well? Because there is a hankering to be free of something or to have that enjoyment, but that is not going to happen. That's causing the lamentation. So does the lamentation inherently includes the hankering?
Okay, does lamentation inherently include hankering?
Because I'm expecting something to happen, and that's not going to happen because something happened.
I'm hankering to end the discussion on lamentation. Okay. See, in one sense, it is like two sides of the same coin. So one side is hankering, and you could say the other side is lamentation. So when the focus is on gaining something desirable, then that is when it's hankering. But when the focus is on either losing something undesirable or having lost something undesirable, then it is lamentation. But both are associated with each other. That they're not that separate. Because in one sense, it's just, oh, I lost that. Oh, I want that. Now, is it the loss that is occupying my mind, or is it the want that is occupying my mind? When the want is occupying my mind more, then I will be filled with hankering. When the loss is occupying my mind more, then I'll be filled with lamenting. But both, in one sense, is the same. The coin is the coin of incompleteness. We feel something vital is missing in my life, and we seek to gain that some way or the other. But when we connect with Krishna, we practice yoga, ultimately bhakti yoga, we connect with Krishna, that is the time when that sense of incompleteness goes away, ultimately. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So nowadays we read most of the business books. There is a new, it's not relatively new, but lately they have identified grit is the long-term indicator of your success or happiness.
Yes.
So that's what they want to teach to the kids and even in the business. And in a way, grit gives people to think very long-term and not be perturbed by the short-term ups and downs, and be persistent in spite of, against all odds and so on. So now that, in a way, it's a spiritual concept. Of course, the ultimate grit is beyond this lifetime and then thinking. So can you connect the dots? And maybe that's one of the reasons why some people who understand and connect with the concept of grit, they don't see how, the spiritual consciousness, of course, it's a higher level.
Yeah.
So if you can connect and contrast.
Okay, so how is the concept of grit? Is it connected with spirituality? Well, grit basically means that you keep persisting, you have resilience, you have determination. So that is at the very least a characteristic sattva. Now it can go beyond also, as you said, to spirituality. So essentially the idea is that life will have ups and downs, and when a person doesn't have that grit, then especially when they have downs, it's like external is up and down, but for a person who doesn't have grit, when the external goes up, it goes down, it just stays down only. That okay, I just lost, I quit. It's like that it happens. Now on the other hand, so this is for a person with low or no grit. We can say this is basically a person who is very much affected by dualities. Krishna says that when the difference between Rajoguna and Tamoguna is that in Tamoguna we focus too much on the negatives, and that's why the lamentation is far greater than the situation. The lamentation is far greater than the negativity of the situation. And in Rajoguna, the anticipation is far greater than the positivity of the actual situation. Oh, this is going to be the best thing in my life. If this happens, I'll be forever happy. Well, no, it's not going to happen. So now, so you could put it this way that, say this is the outer up and down, and inside there can be a far greater duality going on, and Sometimes it just goes way up and down, sometimes it just stays down. But what will, so this is external, this is internal. Now on the other hand, if somebody has resilience, see, now if you consider the Gita talks about the Sthita Prajna, what it is saying is Dukkheshva Anudvigna Manaha Sukheshu Vigata Spruha. So it's not saying be blind, don't feel any happiness, don't feel any distress. What it is saying is, yeah, there will be dukkha, there will be sukha. But essentially, if these are the dualities, then the effect internally is much lesser. So, this is the external dukkha and this is the internal effect of that. The internal effect becomes much lesser. Now, how does this happen? There are various ways to develop grit. And people talk about various things, but generally, the idea is that you focus on some bigger purpose, you have some bigger values. If the only value driving you is success, and you don't get success, then naturally you go down. But if you're pursuing not success, say, but you're pursuing excellence, you're pursuing excellence in your field, okay, even if I fail, I still can learn and grow. So, the grit comes from the values and purpose that one has. And ultimately, if you understand that we are indestructible souls, and that Krishna is guiding the world ultimately to a better place, then that can lead to the greatest level of grit. We can have, that means, grit, as I said, can be developed by having higher values and higher purposes, to the extent we have these. But beyond that, these devotees also need to have higher values and higher purposes. If a devotee starts thinking, okay, my entire stature as a devotee depends on how many books I distribute or how much funds I raise. And if tomorrow I'm not able to distribute that much, does that mean I'm no longer I have become one day I was a glorious devotee and now I become a useless devotee? No, these things change. So we want to do a big service to Krishna, but we don't depend solely on external success. So beyond that, devotees also need to have higher values and purposes, but to the extent we understand that we are indestructible souls, then what happens is, again I go back to the world's ups and downs may destroy my functional identity, but it does not destroy my fundamental identity. I still remain a soul. I'm an indestructible soul, and I'm guided. My life is guided by my infallible Lord. If you understand these two things, then a devotee can actually develop an enormous level of grit. So the many of the characters of Sthita Prajna, they in the Bhagavad Gita's 2nd chapter, they are actually very similar to the characteristics of a person with a significant amount of grit. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Prabhuji, I'm trying to understand that even at the battlefield, Krishna told Arjun that, okay, you know what, if you fight and if you kill them, they will go to heaven, and if you don't fight, and also, but is the ultimate goal to go to heaven only, or
No.
all and moksha?
That's why this is the first level that Krishna has talked about. The first level of application of Atma Gyan. That death is not the end. But then, as Krishna moves on, heaven is also not the end. There's a higher end beyond that. And that Krishna will start from 2.38. That we'll discuss tomorrow.
Does one descend from heaven back to earth also, or is it
Yeah.
a one-way time? Once you have reached heaven,
Yeah, Krishna says that heaven is also not an eternal place. It is, you go there, kshine punye martyalokam vishanti. That one comes back from heaven. So that's why it's also temporary. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, last question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. My question is, once a devotee comes to that platform where you know you have all this knowledge and you understand there's people are suffering or enjoying based on their karma. So you are already in that knowledge. So with does it make a person hard-hearted because you are already sthita prajna, so nothing affects you?
Okay. Does having this knowledge make a person hard-hearted? Well, there's a sthita prajna. There's a very significant difference between being hard-hearted and being clear-headed. So sthita prajna is more about being clear-headed than being hard-hearted. So hard-hearted means, you could put it this way, that in my recent book on the mindfulness, there is this article, that hard-hearted is basically no emotions, and clear-headed is no control by emotions. Having emotions is not the problem. Being controlled by emotions is the problem. So bhakti is highest emotion. Bhakti is the richest emotion. And a devotee has emotions. But the problem is when emotions control us. Emotions become our sole basis for decision making. So that's why in bhakti especially, now we focus on spiritual growth. Sometimes some people measure spiritual growth primarily by detachment. And that is true more for the jnana yoga. But in bhakti yoga, spiritual growth is measured more by service attitude, not by detachment. That means that we focus on how can I best serve in this situation. Especially if we are living in society, we are living in a community of devotees, then detachment is not the most as important a virtue as service attitude. So how can I best serve? As a parent, parents cannot just the children, but taking responsibility, like parents need to be protective of their children, but protectiveness can very easily morph into possessiveness. So how do we prevent that? That is by service attitude. These are also souls who are parts of Krishna, and they've been entrusted in my service, in my service to Krishna, entrusted to me for my service to Krishna. So when we have that, there are emotions, but we are not simply controlled by our attachments, we are controlled by our emotions. So emotions are important. And sthita prajna, when it is said that that person is steady, that doesn't mean that they are unemotional. It's certainly not that they're emotionally dead. It just means that they are immune to being dominated or controlled by their emotions. They take in emotions and then they process the emotions and then they act in a way that serves their higher purpose. Okay. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Gaur Premanande. So tomorrow we'll discuss about Karma Yoga and about Sthita Prajna, and I'll discuss a little bit more also about how Srila Prabhupada gives his commentary, and Srila Prabhupada's commentarial style. Either we will discuss tomorrow or day after tomorrow. We'll talk about third chapter. Okay.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So just a quick announcement. This is a 4-part series on the overview of Bhagavad Gita. We plan to cover chapter 1 to 4, but I don't know, we may reach till chapter 3. But just one important announcement regarding Thursday's event. That session will happen in Bhadra Gauranga Prabhu's home. Where is he gone? I thought the host was here somewhere. So if you're not RSVP'd, because he's making prasadam arrangements, so please RSVP. His father-in-law is still here, so if you want, you can tell him if you're not RSVP'd. Prabhu, can you raise your hand? Yeah. So, so that is very important. That's a home program, so we may need to arrange for all the logistics. So that's one thing. So let's also thank His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Oh, he is here. Bhadragaranga Prabhu is here. So can you raise your hand, Prabhu? So I'm saying he is the host for Thursday, the home program, which will be the overview of third chapter. Sorry? Yeah, it will be online also, but if you're planning to attend in person, so please let him know, because he is preparing for the prasadam and other logistics. So, and he can give you address if you need. So dear devotees, let's express our gratitude and thank His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu by chanting Hari Bol sincerely from our heart for taking us so deep into the Bhagavad Gita. And this is really a new perspective with which I get to see the whole Bhagavad Gita. Prabhuji. So let's thank him by loudly chanting Hari Bol 3 times. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! And for those who have heard Chaitanya Charan Prabhu for the very first time, he is also known as spiritual scientist. Right? You can see how he can technically explain a very complex philosophical things. He is also a well-known speaker, author. There are multiple books Prabhu has written. He has written more than 20 plus books. So please grab a copy of that. And we also have a whole package if you want to buy all the books. So he's also a monk. He's also part of the ISKCON Shastrik Advisory Council. He's also a co-editor of the Back to Head Godhead magazine. So Prabhu is very well versed in Shastras. So, and we are very, very fortunate that Prabhu is here for 4 days with us and giving this deep knowledge on Bhagavad Gita. So we'll continue tomorrow with the rest of the chapter 2. Hare Krishna.